Annyeonghaseyo. This is Ed Buendia. It's so good to be with you again today. And we thought we'd take this opportunity just to initiate a conversation with you at Hanyang University. I can't tell you how excited we are to be working with you on this project. And we have been thinking about this project for some time now. And so we're looking forward to moving along and trying to develop some structure that would work for both you and this team. Importantly, I thought what as an opening moment at this particular junction, even though while we're waiting for the request for proposal, I wanted to talk a bit about just some process dimensions, particularly one, do a bit of introduction, and secondly, introduction of some of the other team members who are going to be participating on this project. Equally, I wanted to talk about the communication piece as to considering we're in two different time zones, what mode of communication might be helpful, as well as discussion of trying to think about how to proceed with what's best, how to share documents, and so forth. So the communication piece was the other piece I wanted to touch base with you. Third, I'd also wanted to talk a bit about kind of the scope of this project. In meeting with, forgive me, I'm going to get a name here. Meeting with, forgive me, Saijong Kim at the Korean Research Foundation. He indicated that the request for proposal will be available sometime either later this month or early May. So hopefully we can begin to get a little more precision as to what aspects of what the language specifically states in that request for proposal. When I was in Korea last in October, speaking with him, it was clearly identifying. He indicated it was clearly going to identify multicultural education and in-service practicing teachers' professional development activities, and so that gives us a bit of an idea of what areas. However, I think there's just still a bit more precision on what the language they're requesting. Equally, I wanted to touch a bit about just we got started just on kind of thinking about some ideas, and we'll talk about those if it's helpful. Again, I think before we go into kind of those pieces, well, I apologize. What might be helpful is talking about the structure of what are typical grant structures for Korean granting institutions and higher education institutions in Korea. We, in starting this process, have looked at using our template that we typically use for National Science Foundation grants, and these NSF grants have a particular structure. I don't want to assume that those grants the grants in Korea work from the same structure, so it would be helpful to know that. So those are some of the key elements that hopefully we can talk about in this short conversation with you. And so I think probably what we'll start is with just kind of communication. 고맙습니다. So let me talk a little bit about who this group of researchers are at the University of Utah. First of all, I am Ed Buendia. I am the principal organizer and lead researcher here at the University of Utah. I'm a full professor in the College of Education in the Department of Education, Culture and Society. We also have Veronica Valdez, who will be working on and off on this proposal. Particularly, she'll be giving a lot of feedback and doing some writing. They also have two PhD level students, Cindy Quinn as well as Cindy Fierros. They are two advanced PhD level students who are at the dissertation phase of the work. Equally, we also have Ki Jung-na, who will be functioning as the liaison with this group, and eventually what we'll do is we will write her into the grant as a key researcher as well as collaborator in some of this process, at least from the Utah end. Kijang will be the key individual who will do translation for us as well as any translation either of documents or verbal communication. Let me just quickly turn it over so that you have a sense of who these group of individuals are.
Hi, I'm Cindy Nguyen. I'm a third-year doctoral student in Education, Culture, and Society. I'm presently in the dissertation phase and proposing a project on charter schooling and teen mothers. My teaching experience includes teaching in gender studies as well as ECS. I've TA'd for 2 years, ECS 3150, Introduction to Multicultural Ed, and I'm also working as a design team lead for the hybrid transition of that same course. My research interests include gender, sex, and race, urban education, policy, as well as Asian American feminisms, pedagogies, and epistemologies.
안녕하세요. 제 이름은 나기정이고요. 지금 닥터 부엔디아 교수님 오피스에서 지금 같이 리서치에 대해서 설명드렸습니다. 모든 참여하시는 분들이 비디오를 인트로덕션 비디오를 만들 건데요. 제가 이제 시작하고요. 저는 유타 대학 쪽에서 컨택 퍼슨이 돼서 한국하고 미국을 연결해 드리겠습니다. 또한 필요하신 거 있으시면 저에게 연락 주시면 닥터 부엔디아 교수님하고 그 외에 여기 참여하시는 교수님들과 박사과정 학생들에게 연결해 드리겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Cindy Fierros, and I'm a third-year doctoral student in the Department of Education, Culture, and Society at the University of Utah. I've been involved with the Multicultural Education course for 2 years now, 4 semesters as a teaching assistant and 1 semester as the instructor for the summer course. I've also been involved this semester with conversion of the Multicultural Education course into the hybrid format, so partial online and partial face-to-face. My research interests stem from my experience as a teaching assistant in the multicultural education class. I am interested in finding transformative and creative pedagogical strategies to employ as an instructor of color in the multicultural education course.
So in terms of communication, we as a team here at the University of Utah, we're trying to figure out what would be the best mode of communication. So we wanted to start off with just this kind of introductory video as a way to engage the group as well as introduce ourselves. We aren't opposed to using this as a vehicle for having conversations. We are using the Dropbox app, and it allows us to send large files, and one of the pieces that we could potentially do is use this particular Dropbox application as a way of sending files and sharing files, so that might be something to do. Equally, I think it's going to be important with as we move on to possibly meet over Skype as a way of just kind of bouncing ideas off, and I think that becomes important. One of the pieces that we are all pretty clear on our end, we really don't want to define a curriculum and just try to transpose it into a South Korean context. All of us are pretty uncomfortable with that. We have particular areas of expertise that we would like to engage with your team and you at Haenyang about, and work in collaboration of defining what this curriculum might be, as well as work on defining some of the modules that might be put into place. What we also, so with that being said, it would be helpful for us to contemplate a Skype conversation possibly as a second conversation or follow-up to this conversation, if that makes sense to you. My last conversation with Dr. Kim at the Korean Research Foundation indicated that, and this was maybe a week ago, indicated that the RFP, the request for proposal, has not been released. So it looks like we're in a wait-and-see mode right now with regard to what the language is. What we want to do is we wanted to just send some provisional or preliminary ideas, might be a better word, preliminary ideas around some direction as to where we might go. But it seems to us, as we were looking at this, that we really are needing your input and conversation around the development of, one, what this might look like in terms of the programming, two, the evaluative research component of this, and three, a broader way of thinking about this in terms of creating a sustained program once resources are gone, if we are allocated resources. So I think those were some of the questions that came to mind. We also thought, with regard to timeline, we wanted to work to define a timeline, particularly even though we're waiting for the requests for proposals. Trying to think through specific pieces so that we can begin to scaffold some of the key elements that we might be thinking. So I think it would be helpful to think about when we might structure those kinds of conversations. So with that being said, I want to stop there, and we've sent a document which is just kind of preliminary document, as well as we are working from a framework in terms of a template for a grant, working off the United States framework for the National Science Foundation. We don't know if you have a template of grants and the structure of granting RFPs from the Korean Research Foundation, but that would be helpful to see. We've included the template of the National Science Foundation of its content elements, but it may be the case that there are deviations from what is requested from the Korean funding agency. So it would be helpful to know what those key components are, as well as try to talk in our next conversation about next steps. So thank you very much. 고맙습니다. It truly is a pleasure to have this moment with you.